Good morning, everyone. Today's webinar in the License to Cure for Device Development series, and the focus is on materials compliance, which covers the compliance with regards to substance contents, so typically EU-RoHS or European REACH, and a number of other regulations. For devices and for diagnostic tools, or say for the life science domain, the main focus is typically the RoHS, since it's a basic requirement for the CE marking, REACH since it's a general requirement, and for example, covering the phthalates, which has been in part of the device regulation for quite some time. We also have typically batteries, packaging regulation to follow. More recently, we've seen the rise of California Proposition 65. That's been in the news over the last few months. We've focused on rapid changes in regulations and conflict minerals related to the Frank-Dodd Act. Focus on conflict minerals and traceability on these substances or minerals. So that's the background, and that's the focus for the session. We've covered all the general topics, I'd say, and this session we have today focuses on materials compliance. We've made some changes to the schedule compared to before the Christmas break and Christmas holidays. And as you might see here, we will run this session every second week going forward. So not as frequent in the past. So you have time to review the webinars and go through the contents. Okay, so what is this about? All through the series, we've looked at the different aspects of PLM for device development. And one important aspect is to have the one version of the truth for the complete enterprise. So everyone in the organization should see their relevant view of their current product definition, which means that you need to have the accuracy with regards to traceability, the accuracy with regards to, of course, the product behavior and attributes, but also the accuracy from a compliancy perspective. So if we look at regulatory compliance as one aspect of the product definition, we need to understand how is this product sourced, or is it developed in-house? What kind of processes to ensure their current status and their compliance status, and what are relevant specifications. And when it comes to relevant specifications, if we're talking about CE marking, it might be test reports, it might be certificates. When it talks to or talk about materials compliance, what we're interested here in is, of course, on the product side, we're interested in the enterprise parts and their compliance status, but as you can see here, we're also interested in the manufacturing equivalent part, from which supplier might this be sourced, and we need to guarantee that they have proper routines for materials compliance. Additionally, what kind of materials are referenced and used, and what kind of evidence or materials declarations do we have to from that specific supplier to understand substance contents and the regulatory status. So that's from the product perspective. From the compliance status perspective then, we need to know, is this particular release of a product, is it compliant, yes or no? So these are the different indicators: yellow, green, red. A red in this case indicates a high material risk. So it should warn us that this material, if I have a selection, perhaps I should choose a different material, because this material is quite likely to be phased out or will be reportable or will be constrained over the next few years. If it's green, then it's compliant. It could be either the supplier or the material which is green. If it's green material, it's environmentally friendly. If it's a green supplier, we know that that supplier has proper routines for materials compliance. And we know that we have a history with the supplier which supports a sustainable purchase from the supplier. There are also additional information here. If we are to understand materials compliance, we need to understand the regulatory status. More on this later. So focus today is on the second area. What is the compliance status and how do we get to that status? But in order to understand that, of course, we need to understand, do we have the proper product definition? And we need to understand where are we in the development project. So common question which I receive is, of course, why should we do this in PLM, and why don't we just throw man-hours on this challenge to collect materials declarations to get our compliance status? Of course, one of the big challenges is to stay current with the relevant product definition. As I hinted on the previous slide, was that we need to know how is this part sourced, so from which supplier, and we need to have an updated materials declaration from that supplier. Additionally, I need to know that I'm working on the right revision or the right version, or if it's relevant for materials compliance, I might be interested even down to the lot size or the batch size or the unit. And if that's the case, of course, I need to know that I'm working with the right set, the right batch, the right lot, on the right version, on the right revision. So that's the key motive of making or building materials compliance functionality into your PLM tool. But another good motive is, of course, that within this framework and within PLM in general, we have the life cycle of our manufacturing equivalent parts. So we can determine what kind of status should this component or should this product have. Is it approved? Has it been released? Same is true for the evidence for materials compliance status. Do we have the proper evidence? What kind of type is that evidence? Is it a test report? Is it a PDF, a signature in a PDF file? Or is it a formal materials declaration in 1752 format? And is it full material disclosure? And in order to handle that and provide that with the proper compliance, regulatory compliance status, we need a proper approval process, and we need the tools to determine what kind of validity should this evidence have, and what kind of risk is involved in this evidence, and what kind of risk is involved in this material. So that's another important motive. Otherwise, my option would be that I have materials declarations in a file structure, perhaps referred to in an Excel spreadsheet, and it becomes very difficult to have control of changes, versions, revisions, and of course keep it current with what's going on in the fast pace and the product development projects. So the second good motive is, of course, to have that approval process. From a product point of view and development decision point of view, one good reason to have it in PLM versus, say, later in the development or systems environment in ERP or MPS system is, of course, that I want to support the earliest possible decision on a materials choice or a supplier selection. So from really early conceptual design or early material selection or supplier ranking and rating, I really want to understand what's the materials risk, the environmental risk involved, and what's the supplier risk involved. And I would say those decisions are perhaps not primarily based on the regulatory punishment which I might have following if I'm not compliant, but rather the risk for upcoming changes. And those, if there is a risk that I need to phase out a specific substance or material, then I want to stay out of those substances as early as possible. Same is true with suppliers. I don't want to add risky suppliers, suppliers where I don't have a history, suppliers which might have a bad track record on compliance. And if that's the case, I want to detect them as early as possible, since the earlier I make that decision, the least costly it will be to adjust a later change. Okay. One really important aspect is that and that's my fourth motive for introducing materials compliance in PLM, is that I can use automatic rules to detect relevant changes. Of course, since it's a PLM platform, whatever engineering change we have will automatically be detected. This means our revisions or our versions or our approved vendors, whatever they might be. So all these changes are tracked automatically as part of the PLM platform. And of course it connects back to the stay current with the product definition, the first item I highlighted here. But it's also related to sourcing. So I want to have sourcing changes detected as early as possible. And as soon as there is a change of sourcing, a new supplier is added, it will be highlighted in the system that I need updated evidence from this supplier. So instead of having controls on new suppliers being added to the system, it's rather that as soon as I refer to them from a compliance enterprise part, then I get a reminder that I better start requesting materials declarations from the supplier. The third change category which we track is the regulatory one. And this means that we automatically can detect a new regulation, of course. So as soon as, a good example is the REACH update, which we typically have over Christmas. I think it was on the 17th of December this year. With that, we had a few new substances added to the SVHC list. And with that, we automatically get an indication that if we haven't received confirmations and evidence from suppliers that they do not provide this substance, or they provide it within the given threshold values, then they should get a reminder, and we should get a reminder that we should request this information. Additionally, if these suppliers have already provided full material disclosure, so full substance information, then we do not need to bother re-requesting materials declarations. We've already received that information. And it will just check the contents and compare that with the new and updated regulation in our regulatory library. So that becomes a very powerful tool to detect regulatory changes, sourcing changes, and engineering changes. And that's really the key essence with regards to a rapid increasing number of materials declarations relevant for regulatory requirements, and there are even more rapid changes. So that's really the essence why adding it, and the key value of adding it to your PLM portfolio. When it comes to using the materials compliance module within Innovia or the 3D experience platform, there are several good reasons. The functionality for materials compliance has been around for quite some time. I think it's since 2004, 2005 or so, and that's when Technia started working with these functions. We started to use the functionality early, the early experience was that it provided the answers with regards to compliance status, but it was fairly cumbersome to work with, and it required a lot of changes. But since then, it has matured substantially, and today it's a set of very powerful modules to support a complete materials compliance process within Innovia. The overall process we're supporting with the module is divided up into six different areas. The first one is the compliance definition management. So that's our management of our regulatory library, which regulations to track at any specific point, and how to switch these regulations on. In this case, Technia and DS are providing a library of compliance definitions to our users and customers. So if you're using and have a license for the materials compliance module of Innovia, you're subscribing to a library of current regulations. So whenever there is a regulatory change, we will update that library and send out a new XML file with new regulatory definitions to our users. And this assumes that it's easy to update these regulations, and it is just importing this XML file. It's done in a few minutes, and of course that really is where the functionality starts. Scoping and scrubbing, second item in the process, is the cleaning up of a bill of material to fit different materials regulations. So, for example, the European RoHS and many of the RoHS regulations are based on homogeneous material. They assess the threshold contents or the threshold values for an item or a part, and it's homogeneous material, it's solid material. So if you really break that down, it's breaking it down into its smallest parts, which you can separate in a proper test. And it's focusing on the percentage of a certain material within that homogeneous material. So this might be that you need to detail your bill of material substantially to isolate a specific part of your component or product. It requires that all the roll-up and evaluation of materials or substance contents is based on your unit of measure and how that is calculated and added up. That's the basic requirement for the complete roll-up behavior. So all these parts have to be properly defined. And otherwise, it's of course, you need the details on suppliers, you need the details on your manufacturing ID or part number, your enterprise part number, and you have to develop that model. So there's quite some work in scoping and scrubbing. And of course, that's also a good reason to have your materials compliance tools within your product definition backbone. So it's easy to remodel the bill of material, detailing the bill of material wherever it might be applied, and implementing that change, of course. Okay, third item is supply chain integration. That's going out to your suppliers, requesting materials declarations, receiving their replies, reviewing and approving their replies, and storing that information, putting those in connection with a specific set of parts, so that they can be used for the fourth item, which is the compliance analysis. The compliance analysis is the basic requirement of compliance status, yes or no, of course, or if there are exceptions, what are those exceptions, and all these kind of different evaluations. But it might also be more detailed analysis on recycling parameters, specific REACH properties, reporting responsibilities, etc. The compliance status and eco-design, the fifth item here, is the feedback of a compliance status, a materials risk, or a supplier risk, feeding that back to whoever is to make a specific decision. So this is providing information on the material compliance status and the material risk to the component engineer or the medical designer who is responsible for selecting a specific material. It's feedback on the supplier risk and the feedback to the purchasing engineer or the sourcing organization or product or project manager or responsible for selecting a supplier to provide the proper inputs. Sixth item is the regulatory reporting, and the reporting to our customers or to our manufacturers or who else is working with us, if it's a regulatory report for WE or China RoHS, whatever it might be. Some of the larger OEMs are requesting, if you're a supplier, they might be requesting 1752 export files, and that's typically generated in the system. These are the main parts of a process, but instead of discussing process and how that fits together and who I might be, I'd go into the application. So I'm logged into the 3D Experience platform, or Innovia. It's a 14x release still. We're a few weeks away from 15x. So this might be that I need to log in again. Let's see if that's the case. Yes. Okay, so this is what the system might look like when I log in. I just switch off this dialog. So in this case, I've logged in as a compliance engineer. So someone who's knowledgeable in REACH, RoHS, environmental legislations, typically someone who also has experience with product compliance. I have access to quite a wide set of applications in my application portfolio. For this work, I need some of the basic tools. I already mentioned the bill of material and DMR. I will need the COPPA audit procedures, because that's typically how the regulatory requirements are channeled and controlled in an organization, since they're related to the CE mark, for example. But I also have separate applications for materials compliance. And there are 3 apps which are my main apps. One is the BOM materials compliancy, which works with the compliance status in a BOM structure. Another one is the compliance reporting, which is fairly full functionality. And the third one is the materials compliance, which is really the full capability. And I'll start off in this functionality because I want to show you the first part of this process, the compliance definition management, where we worked with the different regulations. So we'll switch to the compliance definitions. So these are all my regulations, and as I pointed, it's a library where I keep all current regulations, and they should always be up to date. I might have versions and revisions of specific regulations which are forward-looking, so they might be looking 6 months ahead or 1 year ahead. So I, well in advance of a regulatory change, can review upcoming substance regulations and see how they impact my current development portfolio. If I'm on a longer product life cycle, for example, for a diagnostics product, I might have a life cycle on 10 years. That's the regulatory scope I might be working with regards to the substance information. Even though it's difficult to have that foresight within the materials compliance domain. For each and every regulation here, I have additional details. So it's just not a name, but it's all the details required to understand this regulation. So just pick one example here, and if we look at the basic information here, it has information on all the substances which are restricted or reported, or which have reportability in line with this regulation. It states what kind of threshold I need to meet and what's that threshold value. And it states if it's on part level, so or material level. Part level is typically what you see with REACH, where you have it on component level, while material level is homogeneous material. And of course, it differs quite substantially how you are to break down your specific end item in your bill of material. On the right-hand side, we have also different applications to say that this rule should only be applied if we have batteries in the structure. So anything in the structure which has been identified and typed as a battery. And it's something true for different parts, plastic parts, whatever it might be in this regulation here. We'll switch to another regulatory rule. So we'll have a look at the European RoHS somewhere. So here we have the Annex 4, so it's specifically for us in medical devices and diagnostics, or say control instruments. So here we have all the exemptions with regards to the European RoHS. Being current with current expiration dates. They all have their different application codes. If we would be using this functionality with the TVC layer, we would also have entry dates and expiration dates, and we could also define alarms for the expiration of these exemptions to track them over time. But this is some aspects of the compliance definitions and the library. As pointed out, it's great value to subscribe to these libraries, and you're receiving these at least 4 times a year, the relevant updates for different regulations, potentially even more frequently, which is typically something you will be interested in, for example, if you're using BOM Check as your data collection platform. Then these are the compliance definitions. This is what they look like. This is how they work. Properties on the different regulations here is they have a name, they have a compliance definition, could be private or enterprise. If it's enterprise, then it's present for the complete company, and it will be active when it's switched on. It will work on all enterprise or compliance enterprise parts in the organization. So it will really evaluate compliance status on everything in the database. Here we switched on yes for rollup, which means that it automatically updates whatever new file is stored into the system. It will evaluate that from a compliance perspective, which means if it has a supplier, but we haven't received evidence, and that's required for proper compliance status, it will indicate that a new regulation is needed. You should send out new request to the specific supplier for this component. Okay, so that's for the compliance definitions. So we'll go over to the second part, the scoping and scrubbing, and how I view my compliance status. So the tools I have at hand here, I'll switch to my compliance portfolio. So this is kind of workbench I use for all the current products I'm investigating from a compliance perspective. So these are different top levels or top node assemblies or the highest top level item in the bill of material. We can see here that with regards to different regulations, we're not compliant at the time being. Everything is indicating red here, which means that we don't meet the regulatory criteria at some part in this product. So it probably contains a few hundred components or so. So let's drill down and see what is really the issue. Before we're leaving this, you can see all the compliance definitions and the different regulations are active here, quite a large number. These icons here is to clearly indicate that packaging and battery are determined out of scope for this part. So we can assume that it's a mechanical design, it's the physical product under this, and that's why the packaging has been descoped. And that's the reason for descoping battery is that it goes under the battery regulation, and that's not applicable to anything but the batteries, which might be excluded here. Okay, so we'll drill down into this one. And we can see that we have a bill of material on our left-hand side, some general properties for this. What's their current status? So it's just in create view, so we have quite some freedom to change this design, it seems. We can see if there are any specific evaluations on this or release statuses on this design on the right hand side here. If we switch to our compliance bill of material, we get a different view, similar to the one we had on the compliance portfolio just a few seconds ago, but then it's broken down on the complete bill of material. So as with any bill of material, we have the quantities, the unit of measures, the revision status, what kind of type it is, perhaps with a description, perhaps with an application. Really the basics on the product on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have the compliance status, and here it starts to change. So we have some subsets here, perhaps an air fan in this case. It's probably a metal frame or a metal structure and a metal fan, perhaps not in any complex material, and accordingly it has green compliance status with most regulations here. The yellow status here on the battery, it's an ion lithium battery, that indicates that we don't know the status at this point in time. And we have requested a materials declaration from the supplier, but we have not received the response yet. So that's why it's yellow. It doesn't violate any compliance regulation, but at the time being, its compliance status is just not clear and is unreported. We see on some regulations here further down that they're red, and if we drill down into a specific specific item here, we can see that, okay, it's on this level. We're non-compliant. So if we go into the details on that level, we can go to the compliance properties. And here we can get the details. How was this evaluated? So in this case, we had a REACH status, which indicated that it's non-compliant for the flash glass. We can also see that here in the summary. So for this REACH regulation, the June update on the SPHC, it's non-compliant, and this is due to the boron oxide and the lead oxide levels. So that's the detailed information. I can also see how it's related to other regulations to see it in a wider context. And here I also have quite a lot of additional detail on different materials compliance properties. It might be on recycled contents, it might be on the manufacturing process, details for that, and it might be with additional details for phase out or lost time approval, whatever it might be. So that's typically the information I receive, and that's typically how I drill down into an overall status on my product down to a specific non-compliant component in my bill of material. I can, of course, filter out only on non-compliant parts. So if I switch on my filter, I can just switch on. Now I'm reviewing REACH, correct? So I'll just switch on whatever is non-compliant here. And it will, as soon as I update my selection here, it will automatically update the compliance definition on my right hand. So it's quite a powerful tool to drill down into specific compliance status. Other tools I will need to understand what's the contents here and how does it work. Let me just close a few windows. Is of course the substance contents. So instead of just viewing the bill of material based on the different parts, I expand everything and review the contents with regards to substance contents. So how much epoxy do I have in this design? How much phthalates might I have? How much nickel might I have? What's the proportion? What does that mean? And especially with regards to my REACH status and reportability, these are the details I want to understand in the contents of how many items we deliver per year to complete my REACH reporting. But this is really the essence. Other good capabilities here, that's on the search functionality, for example. So if I have the materials compliance search, assume that I build up a bill of material, do my scrubbing, and I want to find just compliant parts. I go into, let's see, whatever I search for, I'll get displayed with regards to compliance status. So as you can see in my search results, I have the different regulations present. And when I search, I get my search results as always. I get the immediate compliance status, so I can clearly see that, okay, whatever I choose to add to my bill of material, I will know immediately its compliance status. On my left-hand side, I've switched on the 6W tags, which allows me to drill down. So I could just view my compliance enterprise parts. I might be interested in different types of parts. It might be battery parts or packaging parts, whatever it might be. So I really have powerful tools today to perform quite an advanced analysis, drilling down on my compliance issues over also rather complex bill of material. Okay. So, what else do I want to do and understand or demonstrate here? Wherever one of the key motives for using this functionality within your PLM framework was to automatically detect need for regulatory updates and the need for me to go out to my supply chain and request updated materials declarations. And it's quite powerful functionality to do that. I'm located on my top node here on Optimum root, and I have my different functions. I go to my compliance bill of material, and I mark the top node, go to compliance reports, and I have, for example, the supplier report, which I'll use for the updates. What this will do is it will go through my complete structure. It could actually go through the complete database if I want to, from a top node and down. And I could scan for different regulations to find where do I need an update. Where have I had a design change? Where have I had a switch of supplier? Where do I have a change in the regulation which requires an update on the materials declaration? So we'll limit this to European RoHS, that's fine. So what it does, it goes through the complete database, checks the compliance status, checks the regulation to see, okay, is there need for any updates? And it will identify these are the suppliers whom I need to go out to and request updated information. Some settings, if I want to have manufacturing equivalent parts or just selected. So that's also one of the strengths of the solution. For every parts compliance status, I have 3 different choices. I could either have best case, which typically will find, if I'm on a multi-sourcing strategy, it will find the best or the one which is most attractive. That's for a best case. I could have a worst case, and it will identify the supplier which has the worst compliance performance, or I could have selected case, which is typically the selected supplier or the selected design. And I could work with these three and tune my design and sourcing strategy with regards to these three settings. But in this case, I'll focus on all manufacturer equivalents, not only the selected one. It identified 54 parts, and I'll just tell the system to give me the report, tell me what it states. And here I get the details. So what's the supplier, what's the manufacturing equivalent part, which revision, and what kind of update. And from this dialog then, I can go out and have a predefined set of messages for European RoHS. I set a due date, say, let them have at least a month. So a month from today, please send updated materials declarations for EU-RoHS. I could do it this way, or I could have a predefined template to send out. Skip the IMDS settings, so that's for automotive industry, and I select done here. If we have now the contact details for these suppliers in the system, email address, contact name, it will generate these mails and send them out to the relevant users. So it's really a powerful tool to drive your supply chain and request materials declarations and get the exact status for these declarations. So, so that's some parts which I have covered. Compliance definitions, the scoping and scrubbing, the supply chain integration, going out to suppliers, requesting the materials declaration, and then the compliance analysis to perform the actual analysis in the system. So what do I do as a recap of functionality? What do I do as part of the different sub-processes? Compliance definition management is to select a combination of the different regulations, make them active, make sure that they have the proper time frames, the proper regulatory status. And it might be that I need to change settings for exemptions. Perhaps we have our own substance list, and then I'll do the administration on the Technia substance list. I could also, of course, consider coming regulations. I could create my own materials declaration and compliance definition, and set up my own unique combination of chemicals in that list, things I want to track. Could also be other similar properties such as latex-free or materials which are not part of the final product but perhaps part of the production process, such as radioactive material, which I want to keep track on. But most frequently it's the impact analysis on new regulations. The phthalates, what are their CAS numbers? Do we have them present in our current database? What's the status of that? With which suppliers do I have the risk? Then it's setting the initial materials risk, of course. Scoping is all about applying the definition to our product definition. So I need to use the typing to identify what are batteries, what's packaging, what are labels, software parts, how can I remove those from scope. Connecting that with different internal materials, doing the breakdown of that, and working cleaning supplier data. This is a breakdown of more detailed steps. If you're interested in these processes, just contact us and we'll provide this material to you. And we can make a more detailed demonstration on the different process steps, of course. For those of you who are using the Technia value components, there is a specific overlay based on TVCs to do risk-based materials compliance analysis, something which we developed in order to meet the recast regulation of the European RoHS. Supply chain integration, as mentioned, it's about creating the materials declaration request, but it's also using the other platforms for collecting materials declarations. Innovia has direct integration, for example, with bomb check, which we typically recommend because it's quite a powerful tool for even suppliers with quite a low level of knowledge on materials compliance. They can file and properly understand their materials declarations when done, and the results are very easily uploaded into Innovia MCC. It's actually easier to read it from bomb check than it is to import any 1752 file or just an ordinary PDF evidence document. Also here we have quite detailed descriptions on the processes, so if you'd like to know more, feel free to contact me, and we'll definitely arrange a separate demo session with a more detailed scope. Compliance analysis we have touched upon, and the compliance status and eco-design we have not touched upon that much. It's really a powerful tool if you're working with CATIA or SolidWorks already, or any of the other larger CAD systems supported in 3D VIA viewer, where you could have a color status for your compliance review and communication. It's very powerful feedback tool to the designer working in the CAD system to get the immediate feedback of their compliance status in their own tool. For the reporting, the reports are powerful but not necessarily in 100% sync with regulatory requirements. So for example, for REACH, it is assumed that all reports should be in your local language, and most of the reports are actually generated in whatever language you've defined in your Innovia application. So of course, that's not applicable. There are specific reports for China RoHS in Chinese. We have developed a specific report for this RoHS section of the technical file for CE registration. So there are some good and useful reports, but one should understand what they're used for and what are the basic requirements. So that's an introduction to the materials compliance functionality. I hope it's been a good session and a thorough session on the content. So with that, I'll leave the webinar for today. I'll see if there has been any questions coming up, but I doubt so. From experience, I primarily receive questions through email, and this is my email address. Feel free to send your questions directly to me, if it's related to the recording, to the webinar, or if it's any on the contents of this presentation. All the webinars are available under the Technia events page on our website. This is the URL. So use this one to find the recordings. We will do some cleaning on this recording before we make it public, so it will be available later on today. With those words, I thank you very much for attending today, and looking forward to see you in 2 weeks' time from now. The next session will be on complaints management and MDRs, adverse event reporting. It's a complete process which goes from complaints to CAPA to change and to the complaints effectivity. So it really covers your dialogue with patients or customers and how their input could make an impact on your product development and your change process. More on that in 2 weeks' time, on the 17th of February. Really looking forward to that session and have that webinar for you at the time. Thank you very much for today. Thanks for joining, and thanks. Bye-bye.